This is potentially Lumacorp's most effective instrument for global control. Through international banking, we manipulate the fate of all countries. We have introduced many institutions, such as the IMF and WTO, that work in our favor to impoverish disobedient nations. Always remember, debt is a powerful weapon against countries that don't share Lumacorp's vision.
The lines for food and basic necessities in Venezuela continue to grow as the country's socialist government has prioritized foreign debt payments over the needs of its citizens, but soon they won't be able to meet any obligations. Economists are predicting they're going to be out of money in that country by the end of the year.
And you see the end result. You see this economic privation. It also leads to political privation, if you will. In addition to not being able to get enough food to eat and medicine, you have killings of opposition leaders. You have a state of emergency that's been extended. You have assaults on the free press, etc. So altogether, a very difficult situation. And there aren't people in the United States who are standing for liberalism, classical liberalism. You said.
Perhaps our greatest achievement in banking is the Federal Reserve System. It is a collection of international banks owned by Lumacorp members and financiers. It was created to form a centralized banking system through the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, an act that was indeed penned by some of our most esteemed members. Many of you might still assume that the government itself prints and issues the currency. That is not the case. When America needs money, they go to our boys and ask for it. The money is printed, but it is only representative of a loan. Interest accrues on that dollar until it is paid back to the Fed. In fact, the federal taxes paid by the American population go almost entirely to paying off this debt. So you see, Lumacorp derives a healthy amount of its operation funding directly from the debt of the public. Needless to say, this is one of our most crucial sources of funding and one of our proudest achievements here at Lumacorp.
All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it.
The entire world is facing a debt-driven disaster, the scale of which has never been seen before in human history. The situation is now so severe that we're left with only two options: default on our debt or inflate it away. You can already hear people blaming the free markets and even money itself for our problems, and to me this is just tragic. Because we don't have free markets anymore, and we certainly don't use real money. This is the real reason for our problems. Our money itself has been corrupted. It's not just an issue of economics. This affects your freedom. When this crisis hits, people will be screaming for the government to do something, when it was the government that caused the problems in the first place.
The Federal Reserve is an organization that Anonymous is collectively against, but if it falls, the entire United States will be thrown into a state worse than the Great Depression. An economic collapse means that no one can buy food, shelter, and other basic necessities. Gas shortages will take place, and electricity could potentially be shut off. Now, you're asking, what do you mean, economic collapse? You see, the Federal Reserve runs on a debt-based system. There are currently only 258 billion physical US dollars in existence. Walmart makes more in a year than that. That means that the rest of the US currency is digital. This digital currency only has value because it is credit from other nations. Most of the money in the United States is borrowed from foreign countries. That means that the countries can take it back.
Ultimately, corporations will replace government as a centralized international body that can meet the needs of the public worldwide without the chaos created by national self-interest. When Lumacorp goes public, corporatism will be the foundation for world government. Conglomerates will merge into one cohesive corporation that is responsible only to Lumacorp and the needs of its global employment force.
Well, you know, there's a very famous trick, the Indian rope trick, performed by fakirs, as they were known in the continent of India. The Indian rope trick is where the fakir, he throws a rope up into the air, and the rope sticks to this position up into the air, and then a small boy climbs up this rope and disappears. Now, this is what the central banks are trying to do. They're trying to create a situation where they simply disregard gravity, disregard all laws of economics, disregard the law, throw caution to the wind, keep printing money willy-nilly, and they expect us all, in this case the stock market, is climbing up this rope into the clouds, and hopefully, for this to work, stocks must disappear. They must disappear into a leveraged buyout, mergers and acquisition, to take private. They're hoping that the entire multi-trillion-dollar economy is simply bought out at these high prices, and that nobody actually has to do any accounting for the fact that there's not the earnings to support these prices. They don't have the cash flow. The economy itself, it doesn't have the wages to go out there and buy stuff to support the earnings, to support the profits, to support the stock prices. They all are involved in this idea that you can simply defy gravity and climb up the rope and disappear into the magical land of private equity purchased and buyouts, and everyone deserves to be a billionaire.
The tanks that we see on the streets and the National Guard patrolling neighborhoods and the practices that they're doing with our local police department, this is all in preparation for martial law, so that when they do actually lock down the country, they've got everything secured.
People that don't run in these circles and to whom this information is new, Suzanne, they love to say that we're all conspiracy tinfoil hat-wearing nuts because we still live in a republic. But I think what we're starting to see, for anybody who is objective at all, is we're seeing a totalitarian system now unveil itself. And ever since essentially 9/11 happened, it's been more and more of these draconian measures that are leading us right down the road to martial law. What do you think will be the cause of the declaration of martial law? Will it be a financial collapse or something altogether different? We've seen a lot of false flags. What do you think would be the cause of martial law?
Well, I had written an article earlier this week from a U.S. Marine informant and also a Deutsche Bank informant. And in 2008, we should have collapsed. We should have gone the way of Greece. The only reason why we didn't was because the global elite and the banking cartels put it off on the Eurozone and collapsed the Eurozone in order to gain sovereign debt. Sovereign debt is when you actually own the physical land. You don't just own the buildings, you don't just own the people and the money. They're extracting wealth so that the only thing that the governments will have left to give them is the actual land that they own.
We could be on a big fat bubble, and if that bubble crashes, it's a problem. The word bubble, remember the word bubble, you heard it here first. I mean, I don't want to sound rude, but I hope if it explodes, it's going to be now rather than 2 months into another administration.
And you have the housing bubble. And it may be too late now, frankly.
So there's another housing bubble now?
I think there is, but you haven't seen it yet. It's going to really, I really say there that there's a great risk it could be disastrous. You have $2.2 trillion. The subprime debt was only $1 trillion, and look what it did. This time you got $2.2 trillion. It's ridiculous. People buying things they don't understand. And how about emerging market debt? So the IMF says, hey, don't raise rates because you're going to kill the emerging market debt, structure. And you say, well, we're not supposed to be the banker of last resort for the whole world. But that's not even the issue. The issue is you got a real problem at home.
Hi, I'm Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. Yes, we are going to delve even deeper into the psychology, the physics, the economics of bubble blowing. Bubble blowing. Oh my God, is this the big one? Is this happening? Is this the end? Is this the finite destination of all that is unholy and bubblicious?
Because honestly, you got yourself problems. The word bubble, remember the word bubble, you heard it here first.
Love him or hate him, there's one thing nobody can deny. Donald Trump knows a lot about the U.S. economy.
Almost Halloween, I'm thinking about, once again this year, going as the Invisible Man. This is my costume. It's very cheap. It's a very cheap way to make a nice Invisible Man costume, kids, okay? You go out there, go trick-or-treating, you get a big bag full of candy, it's fantastic. The construction noise you hear all around us is New York City exploding in the biggest speculative property bubble ever in this town in frickin' 500 years. Soon to pop. Pop, I tell you.
И в Штатах таких проблем очень много, их хватает. Это же хоть и ведущая экономика мира, великая держава, без всяких сомнений, но но нерешенных проблем много. Ну, например, огромный государственный долг. Это мина замедленного действия и для экономики самих Соединенных Штатов, и для мировой финансовой системы. Никто не знает, что с этим делать. Что, девальвировать в будущем? Или что-то еще? А что? Ответа нет.
Hi, I'm Ron Paul. I spent 22 years as a member of Congress. Now I live more than 1,000 miles from the nation's capital. But today, I'm briefly back in Washington. I'm not here for political reasons, however. Instead, I'm here to deliver an important message to every American citizen, no matter what your political party affiliation. In short, I want to let you know that a U.S. financial crisis greater than the crisis of 2008 is fast approaching. And I'm going to explain what you can do about it personally to protect yourself and your family. I'm not talking about a political solution, but rather something you and your family can do personally to protect your wealth and your health. You see, after so many years in Washington, I thought I was immune to being shocked by what our government does. But the actions of the Fed and the last two White House administrations have gone beyond anything I could have imagined. Most Americans don't realize that in the past 6 years, we have created $4 trillion of new money literally out of thin air. At the same time, since 2006, we have literally doubled our national debt. And I've said many times over the years, prosperity cannot be created out of thin air by a central bank. So please, as a citizen of this country, pay attention to what your government is doing right now.
What is the proper relationship, what should be the proper relationship between the chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
Are you complaining about the prices constantly going up? Then you might want to watch this video about one of the most unbelievable cases of hyperinflation in history. That is, hyperinflation in Germany in the 1920s, where at some point prices doubled almost every 4 days. Hyperinflation occurs when the inflation rate increases very rapidly, resulting in prices going up very fast and the currency losing its value quickly. One of the most amazing hyperinflation cases in history happened in Germany in the 1920s. As a result of World War I, the German paper mark started to lose its value, and this process accelerated in the 1920s. In 1923, prices eventually ran out of control. The prices went up so much that people were forced to spend billions of marks for daily items and were dizzied by the amount of zeros involved. As an example, a loaf of bread which cost 250 marks in January 1923 rose to 200,000 million marks in November of 1923. Or a newspaper that was sold for 1 mark in May 1922 had a price tag of 70 million marks in November 1923. It was cheaper to use the back of a 1 million mark to write notes, as a notepad would cost billions of marks. Some had to use wheelbarrows filled with cash to get a cup of coffee. At restaurants, customers had to negotiate the price of the food in advance, as there was a good chance that the price could change before the meal was served. Most restaurants did not print menus, as by the time the food would arrive, the price had already gone up. At some point, the situation got so bad that the prices were doubling almost every 4 days. There is evidence that it was cheaper to burn marks instead of wood or coal. Some used marks instead of wallpaper to decorate their walls. Children also used bundles of marks instead of toy bricks. Workers also had to negotiate their wages almost on a daily basis. Some had to use a scale to count the weight of their money to get its value, as it was difficult to count all the bills. Workers were paid twice a day so they could spend the money quickly before it lost its value. Many collected their wages in suitcases. One person who left his suitcase unattended found that the thief had stolen the suitcase but not the money. After collecting their wages, workers would quickly rush to either buy daily goods or pass the money to their family so that they'd spend it before its value had gone down. The German government eventually managed to stabilize the situation by taking a number of initiatives, including cutting 12 zeros from the paper mark and replacing it with a new currency called written mark. However, the economic pressure on the Germans eventually contributed to the rise of the Nazi Party that used Germany's dire economic situation to attract public support and eventually gain power.
Okay, so this is just to confirm that I'm here trying to make a mortgage payment in cash. I have $1,380 sitting in front of me for a $1,371 mortgage payment, and Bank of America is rejecting a cash payment of my mortgage.
Sir?
Here in Lakeport, California. Is that correct?
So you need to turn that off.
Is that correct?
You need to turn that off, sir.
This is what I've just been told. Bank of America has just refused to accept my mortgage payment in cash and is insisting on a kind of a wire transfer. Apparently, in America, cash does not pay the mortgage anymore, is what I'm being told today in Lakeport.
If you go back in history, the reason why we went after Gaddafi was because he was presenting the dinar, which was a gold-backed currency that he was getting together with other countries like in Africa. He was going to subvert the global reserve currency, which is the U.S. dollar, and destroy its complete value by backing it with gold, because the central bankers haven't dealt in gold since 1934. So in order to avoid all of this, the central bankers are going after Iran right now, and that's what this war is about, to try and stop India and China and Russia from buying Iranian oil with gold. Because if they destroy the global reserve currency, which is the U.S. dollar, then what we're going to have is we're going to wake up one morning and we're going to be like Greece. And that's going to cause complete panic in this country. So since they already set off the financial time bomb in the Eurozone, they know that it's just a matter of time before it hits our shores. So they're preparing for it. That's why we see all the movement on the streets. People are seeing tanks being moved in Burbank, California. They're seeing, in the forested areas, they're seeing police, military, escorting them off the property. National forested lands. This is public land, supposedly. By the way, it's owned by UNESCO, and it's a World Heritage Site, so it's actually owned by the UN. But anyway, people are seeing military on their streets. In Anaheim, California, they announced that because of the protest, it was a state of emergency, which I feel is a code word for martial law. I think they're trying to beta test to see if they can go ahead and lock down the country by doing it incrementally through different stages, causing problems, problem, reaction, solution, causing problems in cities, and then go ahead and locking it down and seeing how it works, kind of like a war game. One thing I forgot to mention was through the Deutsche Bank informant, I was alerted to the idea that they're going to possibly create like an internet
to follow
virus.
some breaking news this afternoon. There was a second cyber attack that was hit the cloud-based internet company Dyn, which has impacted several major websites. It includes Amazon and even Gmail. Twitter also says that its users may be having trouble accessing its site as well. Both of them were hit by this attack. And with us now on the phone is Zach Whitaker, a security reporter for ZDNet.
It appears that this cyber attack, may or may not have been, sparked by some sort of state-sponsored actor. But at this point, it's just too early to tell.
I want to point out what you're seeing on your screen right now. We've got a map of the United States. You're seeing the different colors there of the areas that were impacted. And my understanding is the red are the zones that were heavily impacted. You're seeing largely up in the northeast quarter of the U.S., looking at the Seattle, up in the upper left screen there, Seattle and California. Why these particular areas, Zach?
Well, the way that DNS works is that you have different major epicenters of the internet, and you have the East Coast, the West Coast, Europe, Africa, Australia, and all these different epicenters of the internet. And when, the whole point of the DNS is that it's a distributed network. So if one part of the internet goes down, then the traffic that you try and access a website goes through a different portion of the system. Essentially, it means that the internet can never really go down across the world, but sometimes, like we've seen today, portions and regions of the world can be, can appear offline. Some people are drawing at this point is that it may well be a state-sponsored attack. I must say that right now there's no evidence.
And what they would do was, on a Friday afternoon, they would say, well, we have to shut down the banking system because there's a virus in all the banks. You won't be able to use your ATMs over the weekend, but on Monday morning you'll be fine. Well, if you hear of anything like that, you have 72 hours before they roll out martial law.
So wait a minute, Suzanne, you're saying that if you see anything like that in the news media or otherwise, you have 72 hours? Why don't you repeat that, help people understand what that means?
When they're going to roll out martial law, they think that when the financial collapse hits the shores of the United States, they have 72 hours. So with my Deutsche Bank informant and talks with other people in the alternative media, my contacts, I just think that it's possible that a scenario like this, I'm not saying that this will happen, but a scenario like this, and it would give you something to look for, a little red flag to look for. Let's say that the banks all say that there's a virus in all the banking systems, all of the banks, and they have to shut down, like on a Friday. We know that the Obama administration loves to do things on a Friday afternoon or when we're celebrating New Year's Eve. So Friday afternoon, they would say they're going to shut down the banks and get rid of this virus over the weekend. And on Monday morning, everything would be back up. Over the weekend, you wouldn't be able to use your ATM or pay any bills online. But everything will be fine on Monday morning. That is your red flag. You have 72 hours from that moment to do whatever you were planning on doing, get to wherever you were planning on getting to, hunker down whatever you were planning on hunkering down, because they're going to unroll martial law in 72 hours from that moment, whatever scenario they intend to unroll. And I believe that it has to do with the banks, because they're stealing money from us left and right. In fact, I've gotten reports from insiders that they're taking money out of private checking accounts. They're also stealing heirlooms. The Bank of America has stolen heirlooms out of people's safety deposit boxes and ship them from one coast to another, and then claim that they didn't know that it wasn't that it was this customer's property, and then they'll send it back, but they never do. They're trying to squeeze out as much money as possible. And with MF Global and John Corzine, that was a beta test to see if they could take secured customer funds and get away with it, and they did. They're coming for our private checking accounts next. They're looking for as much money as they can to fund this not only domestic but global police state. So like I said, if you hear of anything with the banking industry, and I personally think it might be a false flag with an internet virus or a virus in the banking system as far as their computers go, then you have 72 hours from that time to go ahead and do what you were planning on doing.
Experts say no one has ever attacked the entire internet like this before. About 6% of all websites were affected. For nearly 8 hours, internet users couldn't access their favorite websites.
I noticed a lot of intermittent weirdness on the internet today that was different than every other day. So
Twitter, Google, Facebook, Pinterest, Netflix, just some of the many sites affected by a cyber attack that hit the east and west U.S. coasts and parts of Europe.
The systems that normally work when you type in something like www.twitter.com got so overloaded that when you put in your request, nothing came back.
It's called a DDoS attack, or denial of service. And Philip Lieberman, an LA-based cybersecurity expert, says an attack like this is unheard of.
Today is Cyber Pearl Harbor Day.
The people running our country today are living in a fantasy world. And if you're not careful, you could be the one who pays the price. Hardly anyone is talking to the American people honestly about what is going to happen in our country. So please, hear me out. The way you live, work, travel, retire, and invest in America, everything is going to change. Some of it in ways most people do not expect. Sometime in the next few years, we will experience a new type of financial crisis. And this one will be very different from the financial crisis of 2008, because this time it won't be just a banking and mortgage problem, but a full-blown currency crisis. This will happen because investors around the world are catching on to the fact that the U.S. dollar is not the safe haven it once was. As a result, we are almost certain to have a major stock market crash and a currency collapse too. This will make it nearly impossible for our government to spend more money than they have, to expand the welfare state, to station our military in more than 140 countries. And when our currency collapses, nearly everything else will go with it. Stocks, bonds, commodities, you name it. When you destroy the currency, you can destroy the entire economy. You can destroy the whole nation.
So a message is going to be sent. Will the public know it?
Hope not.
We're likely to see all kinds of new laws and rules about what you can do with your money, where you can put it, and where you can move it. They've been doing that since the 1970s. It's going to get worse, much worse. We're likely to have a massive inflation when the trillions and trillions of newly printed dollars begin making their way into the economy. This period is going to be particularly tough on seniors and anyone relying on fixed income or money from the government. We've also witnessed major changes to the very fabric of our society, as well as our personal liberties. Destroying a nation's money in this manner wrecks businesses, friendships, and families who simply don't understand and aren't prepared for what will happen. What our government is trying to do today has been tried many times before in dozens of places around the world. It almost always leads to disaster. I assure you, this gross experiment with our currency will soon lead to a real currency crisis right here in America, the likes of which we have never seen before. The question is not if, but when. The piling up of unfathomable debt and endless money printing is going to come to an end, and it's going to happen much sooner than most people think. But I promise you, nothing is normal about what is happening in America today. It is all smoke and mirrors, the results of an out-of-control government experiment with our money supply. Governments can mislead people with all sorts of biased reports and statistics. They can even fool people for quite a long time by printing more paper money, but it's inevitable that trust in the money, something absolutely required for it to serve as a medium of exchange and to allow economic calculation, will be lost. That is exactly what is happening right now. It's going to get much, much worse. And it's going to result in another financial crisis sooner than most people think.
But that is the secret to LumaCorp's success. Control the head, and you control the body.
Now, you've talked about also that you think the elite actually want the collapse of the dollar, and so they can establish a new world currency. Did you want to talk a bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is their, dream that they've had for so long. I mean, the Economist cover, I think it's been brought up in every alt media thing. I forget what year it was, but it was, late 80s, early 90s or whatever, but it showed a phoenix, rising out of the ashes of all these burned currencies with like a gold medallion with a zero, which I'm assuming is some digital, Bitcoin type, mark, with the date 2018. So here we are, 2016. How long does hyperinflations usually take? 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years at most. Could it possibly be between now and 2018 we see the destruction of all those burning currencies and the rising of in ashes of this Phoenix zero decimal point thing by 2018? Pretty good bet, I guess. I don't know.